COVID, and probably one of the only benefits of COVID was that we got COVID funds, and those were one-time funds. And I would say this district did a great job of prioritizing COVID funds, and we spent it on people. We spent it on additional staff, and we spent it on additional counseling, and really tried to say, how is this money going to help our students the most? At that time, I made it uber clear, this is temporary. These small classes are temporary. This structure is temporary. These are one-time funds. Now, as you saw, we got a couple years of one-time funds, a few years of one-time funds. So we really spread those out. We prioritized staffing continually. Starting last year, I started saying, I need everybody to prepare. We will go back. It's not a shortage. It's not a budget, a budget problem. It's just a realigning to what our true budget is without one-time funds, that we will go back to our previous structures. We'll see impacts on class sizes. They will be larger, and we'll see some combination classes. And that is at the point we are now. We just presented budget last night. That budget that we presented is a budget that is pre-negotiations, because we have not settled negotiations for our current year that we're in. And we're looking at possibly doing a 2-year contract. But when we settle for current year, that means we pay retro all the way back to July 1st of 2024. That will have a big impact on that reserve level. And then additionally, as we begin in 25-26 with a new negotiated contract, that will have another impact on our reserve level. So we won't be likely making our reserve level that we're shooting for, which is between 30 and 35%. We'll likely fall below that. So in looking at that and that situation, we looked at staffing and we looked at our enrollment numbers, and we said, okay, here's what the allotment is per campus. And based on enrollment, Monte Vista falls right in the middle. This is where the allotment was created. And then I said to the principals, this is the number of staffing you get, this is the number of staffing you get, and this is the number of staffing you get. At the same time, and I know there's some confusion over a special education teacher, I'm sure you understand that there's case law or case numbers that are required by Ed Code. And so we were starting the year at Vista Valley at the top of the caseload. That can't happen, because what happens throughout a year? Students get identified. So we know we add more students, and so we can't stop with a full case. We can't start with a full caseload. We had to add more staff. So in looking at our structure, we said, well, we don't need a full-time special education teacher. However, it is impossible. It's very challenging to find a special education teacher, let alone to find a part-time special education teacher. So what we did was we created a position that's part in general ed and part in special ed. So that teacher will be carrying a caseload of Vista Valley students, because that's where we have the high caseload. The numbers were higher. That's also our highest enrolled campus, so it makes sense that they have a higher caseload. So we enrolled, or we will put either 1 or 2 grades, we're still looking at numbers, on that special education teacher's caseload. Then that teacher will also take what are called initial evaluations, assessments, for the other 2 sites. So they'll be supporting the other 2 sites. And then based on those numbers, we'll also have a portion of that position be under general education, which is what's called an MTSS support, which is a multi-tiered system of student support. And the best way to explain that is we see sometimes very complex needs of students. Students are coming in with more complex needs at times. And that we've seen that number over the last 3 to 4 years. We've seen that number come in where there's higher. Like I will say, 5 years ago, I had 1 student here in the district that I would consider like a very complex case that required a lot of coordination and support. Whereas now I generally have 3 to 4 per site. And so this person, and these are students that are served outside of special education, and so this person will also be supporting that, which is a lift off of our general ed classroom teachers as well. In this district, we've also used funds. We've expanded over the last really heartily 2 years. It started 3 years ago as we were planning, but over this current year and last year, we've greatly expanded our intervention program. So we added intervention teacher and really systemized our approach to intervention, which also helps take a bit of a lift off classroom teachers because they know that students that need that really strong and structured support are getting that through our intervention program. So in looking at those numbers, we've got great student to teacher ratios, enviable for, and I'm not going to compare us to MUS, and don't do that, because anyone know what MUS funds per pupil? Anyone know what we fund per pupil?
Like
MUS.
12 or 13,000
For us or for MUS?
for us.
For us, it's generally around like 13,000, 14,000,
And theirs is like 40.
55.
Okay.
So, you know, I will have parents say, well, in Montecito, I don't want to hear it. I actually don't want to hear it. But they're also facing a pretty drastic situation right now that will be a big, huge hit to their, you'll see some changes at Montecito. In fact, I reached out to my colleagues here from Carpinteria to Goleta to say, hey, do you have multi-level grade combos? And they all said yes, except for Montecito. And the superintendent at Montecito said, but I'm gonna tell you, I've already been talking to the board about it and the staff about it because we will be bringing that structure. So the staffing was based on enrollment, and we still have a really great ratio of students to teachers that are enviable for any of the local districts.
Just as a follow-up, I went down the budget rabbit hole. So the whole 162-page document and all that. And that's how I attended the board meeting and had questions about it. So I was poking at the justification of the email on another staffing, which felt like a distraction, quite honestly, but more on the reserve conversation. And the issue that I had is couldn't really find documentation to substantiate the 30 to 35%. Like, why is that a number? Because the minimum threshold's like 4%. Required by the state.
Yeah.
And then there's a separate fund in case of dire emergency around that in a couple months. So then it's what's right for a school our size. So that's why I asked tons of questions about
funded district.
yeah, basic aid district where the majority of funding comes from property taxes, etc. So I think after asking the questions last night, getting some answers, there was documentation published on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you who suggested that.
And some of it's a little old, I'll be honest, 10 years, but there's some this year that does indicate something at our size, 25 to 40. So, but still, it's the question of what's the right number.
Right.
And I think that's what felt like, I guess for me, a little bit of a red herring distraction, because you said it yourself, budget wasn't really the conversation.
Right.
It was part of the conversation. It was really about getting back to
It's
some
like a
levels.
background of this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I felt like for me personally, that would have been more valuable information to come out with directly, to say this, we're just getting back to baseline levels versus trying to go down a rabbit hole over here of a distraction of that. So, but I do appreciate you being here and all the information you presented there.
Yeah.
As well, so.
Noted, thank you.
I have a question about the exact, for the second and third grade classes. This is my understanding, and I would like more clarification around this and around the aid. So my understanding is we're gonna take all the second graders and we're gonna take all the third graders, and that number is around 75, and we're gonna divide it by 3 classes, and there's gonna be a second grade class of 25 kids, a third grade split of 25 kids, and a third grade split of, or a third grade only class of 25 kids, right? Around
Yeah,
3
it's
classes
less than
of
that,
around
yeah.
25.
Yeah, it's less than that, yeah.
Okay, less than that. What? Like
I
what?
don't think it was 75.
24 each.
Okay, so it's 70.
72
72.
total.
Okay, so 24. Okay, so, and then I understand that the second and third grade combo gets a dedicated full-time aide.
Yeah, in our
Correct.
collective bargaining agreement, it was added in there years ago that if you have a combination grade, no matter if it's upper grade or whatever, you get a dedicated aide, yeah.
And so what does that mean? The aide is there from 8:30 until 2:30 every day?
No, it's not the whole day. It's, our aides work from,
8:45 to 11:45 generally, and they shift over to noon duty,
Okay,
recess
so it's
duty.
the same normal
lunch.
yeah,
aid.
yeah.
Okay, but
Then
then,
a lot of
but right now
specials are
they
the
s-
afternoon.
Right, but for the aides specifically, it's.
They split per grade level.
And then what about the second and third grade only class?
Well, then they get lucky and they get their own dedicated aid.
Okay,
And
so they all will get their own,
Mhm, yeah.
cause I was thinking almost like, ooh, do I like beg to be in the split class, cause then it'll be like a 12
But,
to 1.
yeah, but let me
know
tell
what I
you that
mean?
our teachers can certainly speak up now for themselves, is that when they've had combo structures, they work it out. And so they know that there's more of a load on a teacher teaching the combo, so you often will see, okay, I'm gonna give up, an hour of the second grade aid, and I'll give up an hour of third grade aid, or, something like that, because they're getting more than they normally get, because normally it's split between 2 classrooms.
That's a lot of aid time.
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
that's
I know,
great. It's a wonderful amount of aid time for the straight classes and the combo class, like we can make that work really well in terms of taking teachable groups and being able to really hone in on skills and differentiate the instruction, and it's a really great ratio, actually.
That's good to hear.
This may be a really basic question, but how do you determine who's a candidate for the split class if they're second graders? Then
It's a great question. It's not a basic question. It's a
Okay.
great question. And it's a very purposeful approach that we look at. First of all, let me just say, in small schools, it can be challenging anyways to split classes, because you're like, I need 4 classes because this kid can't be with this kid again. So it's already a challenge, but what we do is we structure it. We do look for independent workers that can be in a combination class, that can generally work independently without needing a lot of redirection and things like that. Do we have like this perfect, here's our I don't know what you'd call it, but like our scope of the perfect child we're looking for? No. But we have that small number, and we do though purposely structure classes. We always purposely structure classes. I hate to say it, but we get together and we have conversations about so-and-so can't be of so-and-so, and there's this back history here, and there's, so we just do the same, but we look at what that structure will look like.
our son came from Montessori, where it was this, you're in the same
Multi-age,
class.
yeah.
And he really benefited from
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
tremendously.
yeah.
It was really.
Yeah, I will share, when I was a teacher for 20 years, I was a teacher where my oldest children went. And we always had a combo, and teachers used to vie for the combo because it was oftentimes you did get extra layers of support, and oftentimes you knew, okay, I'm gonna have a pretty, solid class structure. And then I also say that with my 2 kids that were students there, my own 2 kids never got put in the combo, and I was a little bit miffed. It was like, but I understood, I'm like, I know my kids, I know why they need that extra. They weren't perfect.
If a child's in a combo class, I know one of the benefits for Xander was that he was able to be the elder in his third year. If they're in a combo class this next year, will they be in the combo class the following year, so they can actually benefit from being the elder as a third grader?
So there won't necessarily be a combo class the following year, and then we explain a little bit about that. If you look on Hope Avenue, there's a large structure being built. That's a 48-unit family housing building, so it will house 48 families, and that's in Monte Vista's attendance area. And their enrollment will begin not this August, but the following August.
Do you mean the Cumra?
On the Cumbra,
No.
sorry, on the Cumbra, yeah. Yeah, on the Cumbra. Yeah, so that's going to be adding some students to Monte Vista. So.
And then will you get more teachers at that one?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on enrollment. Yeah, unfortunately, they don't come in neat packages too. People don't have kids when I want them to, these nice little neat groups. But I mean, that's part of why we see combos, or we're seeing some weird structures here, because we are a district in flux. A majority of districts in the state of California are screaming and upset about declining enrollment. we're in a really weird situation because we've had somewhat like declining, stable, lower enrollment, especially from when I started. I started here, there were 1160 students in the district. We're now down to about 860. So we've seen some changes, but as you know, we're bracing for some more changes. And then there's been that whole structure of TK being added. We have 4 set TK classes next year. And I do want to make this plea because it will come up again, is that if the state funded our district for TK, that would bring him at minimum, that's if only we got the base funding per TK student, over $800,000 it would have brought into our district for next year. And we don't have that. And I just want to make it super clear that when the state budgeted for TK for all, universal TK, they budgeted for our kids. That money for our kids is in the state budget, but because of a sentence in the budget from the state budget from 2 years ago, we don't get it. And so that's what you've seen me say, those parent squares. We filed a test claim commission, it got denied. We had AB 1391 introduced, it's stalled out in appropriations. It will come back. You will hear me making pleas, and at that point I will be begging you, even if you don't have an incoming TK student, you can see how funding for set standalone TK classes also impacts our budget and our situation here. So
I
anyways.
wonder if we could have like a computer set up for like parents to like
I-
actually
yeah.
log in and do that, cause
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
I said on the
I'm happy to
parent
help
too,
you
I
out next time.
I can help people, I
Yeah.
can, you know, I was
'Cause it takes
willing,
some
yeah.
steps.
I did have some people reach out and I said, sure, let me,
Yeah,
let me help you.
yeah.
So, yeah, and again, that's just, you
'Cause
never
it
know
helps a
what's gonna
lot.
happen, but yeah.
I'm just curious from the teacher's perspective, who I adore all of you. Like, as a teacher myself, if I was told in June that I was getting a combo class in a couple months, I personally would be kind of stressed, given that I'm about to go into summer and then I have a different class that I'm teaching in the fall. So I'm just curious and I know that combo classes are difficult to teach in terms of you have 2 curriculums, you have 2 subjects, it's a lot. It's very different than teaching a single grade level. So I'm curious if the teachers feel like they have enough time to prep for that in the fall, and if they're feeling, like, I would love to know your perspective on how you're feeling about this change.
You want us to step out?
No, I mean, I don't know, like, maybe if they don't feel comfortable, I'm not sure.
And I didn't ask them to be here.
Well, and I have a follow-up question that maybe you could answer within that. We are 2 previous Montessori families from preschool to 2nd grade. And preschool, that combo class is great. You're building on social emotional, it's leaders, becoming a leader, looking up, being mentored. But when you get into 2nd grade, there's real academics that you're having to digest and learn. And I know that our teachers were teaching teams that had years upon years of training with combo classes and how to navigate that. So not asking you, do you have the training, but I mean, has the district been able to provide what you think will?
Yeah, I mean, we've
Support you.
done the 2-3 together before. I've taught the 2-3 combo, and Shauna was the straight 2nd grade, and everything we do is a lot of teamwork. And I think the most challenging part of the combo is actually just like the logistical pieces of like working the schedule and figuring out when the 3rd graders have specialists so we can be teaching the 2nd grade curriculum and all of that. And that's something that once your kiddo steps in our classroom, like, that's already figured out. So there's plenty of ways to be creative, I think, with specialist time and with all that aid support, that we're really teaching a lot of small groups. So I'll be teaching, or whoever's doing the combo is teaching, like, this piece for 2nd grade while 3rd grade is doing this with the aid, and then we'll swap, or all the 3rd graders are going to art together, and then I've got 2nd, or she's got 2nd for music. And so we can pull those individual groups and be really specific with the curriculum, because there is obviously like really specific 2nd grade, 3rd grade curriculum. But it's all really just, it's the puzzle of putting it all together, right? And we've already started like figuring all that out, and so by the time the fall comes, like, all those pieces are together and we can just teach. Yeah, that's what we're.
And in the scheduling, the master scheduling, I know because Mr. Reinstraub mentioned to me, is he starts with supporting the combo. And
Mhm.
so that is supported, and making sure that the specialist schedule and intervention schedule all fits to support that combo. That's the starting piece, and then the rest of the campuses.
We're already talking and planning and working on that, and we have a ton of support from admin, and we're not worried about it. We've done it before. It worked out great.
Yeah.
And
It's not I don't wanna say it's not a huge deal, but it's not a huge deal. Like, it's not, we don't feel it as a huge deal. I think it's really positive for kids. It can be really positive, and we're so lucky at this site that we have lots of support and great teams that work together, so I imagine at Montessori it's different. It's like everybody,
It's a
everyone,
it's a looping.
right? Whereas here it's more, you're working with small groups on specific things, and there's more of that than the whole group. We're not just meeting them in the middle with a whole group lesson.
And if it's helpful for people that have incoming second and third graders, I mean, we have already have planned a structure where they're mixing a lot with their grade alike friends, so that's not gonna be an isolated situation. We're gonna break it down and teach small groups like we do, whether it be straight or.
One other thing I want to throw in real quick, so I've always thought of second grade as a kind of unofficial pre-teacher team, because the aide that we've had in second grade since I've been here, Ms. Coulihan, is credentialed, and she knows the second grade curriculum inside and out, and she works so well with them, so just having that powerhouse aide, it almost is an unofficial four-teacher team, just with Ms. Coulihan in there as well.
Yeah, I was wondering about, I know you talked about Vieja being maxed with special education, and that's why that caseload. Simultaneously, are there other, I don't know, laws or requirements happening around special education where you have to do more assessment? I feel like I've heard about something where there's more requirements on the schools. Is that
Well,
happening too?
I mean, the special education law is constantly changing, almost on a weekly basis. But we definitely have seen, and not just in Hope School District, but in the state of California, and I'm gonna make a guess across the United States, a rise in the number of students identified for support in special education. So we are seeing, whereas when I started, it was generally around 8 to 10% of our population, and now we're solidly in like 12 to 13, 14%. And that's not a Hope School District thing, that is something we're seeing across the state. Our special education, you should come to the board meetings, right, Mr. Bodette? Our special education director just did a great presentation in, I think it was April, on, trends in special education. But look at those board agendas that I send out, because there really are, that we do presentations every month too. And
There's a ton of great information on there.
yeah,
I went
yeah.
back to the whole year and read through them all.
Try to make them like
Yeah.
exciting and
Given the changes with the second and third grade and losing Mr. Regan, are you able to say who the other fifth grade teacher is going to be next year?
we do this, I mean, and let me explain why. It's not, there's no like secrecy or anything. Generally, teachers tend to stay where they are, but the only fear in that is that people then get it in their mind, and if something were to happen over the summer, we have had teachers, my spouse got transferred, I'm moving to Wisconsin or whatever. I mean, things happen, and so we don't like people to like make a connection like, oh, so-and-so is the fifth grade, so-and-so is but I will say what we do is, in this district, teachers give like, here's my top 3 choices, and we try to make their top choice or second choice, and then make changes. You don't see, Mr. Regan did jump around. You don't see that many people though jump around. You tend to see a lot of stability, and so I know I'm pretty sure Ms. Howard wants to stay a fifth.
Absolutely, she
Yeah.
was fifth grade.
Yeah, and then we'll have another fifth grade teacher as well. But we just kind of hold back on staffing, because you don't want somebody to get it stuck in their head of, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, but things can change, and they do, and they have. So.
What I've done in years past is, I think it's August 1st. That's when I say, okay, here's who we got,
Here's the
because
stability, yeah.
we're still here, everything's still the same, where it's changed, but here's the teaching staff where they are, And then we do meet the teacher, and that's when we get the class placements, because we're still making adjustments even in August in terms of class placements.
But we know that incoming fifth grade has some challenges, and that we staff that appropriately.
I'm here as a grandma.
Love that.
Parents couldn't come.
Love that.
Is there any concern about the second graders being at a level where they're still acquiring their basic skills and usually I would associate first and second graders being a smaller class size, because of the need for the short attention span and the very basic skills, and I just wonder how that works in a combo situation in the district.
Yeah, there isn't concern. We've had, like I said, we've had it before, and it's been successful and fun. It's not. It is truly not unusual.
I have a question about how you divide the budget among the 3 different schools. Is it like?
It's not divided among the 3 schools. Where it's a district budget.
Uh-huh.
There is a site budget, and that's divided in 2 ways. So a site budget is divided per pupil, and then also with an add-on based on what are called unduplicated pupils. So unduplicated pupils, but the state of California didn't come up with this name, means a student who is an emerging multilingual student, a student who's homeless, a student who's in foster care, or a student who is considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. So that makes up what's called an unduplicated student. So for instance, Hope has a much higher unduplicated student population than Monte Vista, so they'll get an add-on for unduplicated students.
So is it just
Those are
like
site budgets.
whatever the zone is of the property taxes, that's how much Monte Vista gets?
No,
Or how does it work?
that's the district. Intra-district lines are our own. The district is set by the actual whole district, and that's how property taxes are
So
provided
how
to
do you
us.
decide how much money Monte Vista gets versus Vieja versus?
The site, that's only in the site budget. We don't take the budget and divide by 3, because there's many things that go across,
But how is it done? Like, I'm just curious on how it works and,
Well, it
and
depends on
why
the
certain things happen for Monte Vista versus not for Vieja versus not for Hope. Like, every school is different,
Right.
so I'm just curious.
Having gone through it, I think there's questions. There's a bunch of tables that document percentages of teachers' overall budget and percentages based upon student ratios and ADA and all that stuff.
Right.
So there's calculations that go into that stuff, but they don't like say, here's 3 different pots.
No.
There's a big pot for everybody,
Okay.
and that's why decisions I'm gathering are being made across schools too in some cases.
Yeah.
Because their needs might be higher.
Yeah, it's a district picture.
Correct.
We're a district. We're not individual
And I think it was
sites.
82% or something is property tax funded or something. I think
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
the stat.
that's what makes us
So
a
we
community.
barely get 18% of the budget is like state or
Right.
or
Well,
local or whatever.
I've been on the site.
Yeah.
On the site plans. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, how that works, then if there are changes at, like, for example, there were 2 teachers this year, Mr. Regan and someone at Vieja,
Yeah,
who both
that's a
left,
fair
and
question.
Vieja got backfilled, Monte Vista
Right.
didn't. It seems like Monte Vista is the only combo happening next year in all the 3 schools.
Next year, yes. In previous years, there've been combos with the other schools. Vieja Valley has 52 more students. That's like 2 classes than Monte Vista.
Right, and they
So,
have 2 more teachers.
correct, yes.
Right,
Mhm.
so I'm just curious, like, is their budget, like, what if we get 10 more kids over the summer that are coming to Monte Vista?
So,
At
yeah.
what point do we start moving more budget to Monte Vista, or like, how does that work?
We don't. So it's a district budget, there's site budgets, and so the site budgets are determined per pupil. But also, it should be noted that as a district, and I don't know how many of you remember this, but when you signed your enrollment paper, it says you're enrolling a student in Hope School District, not in Monte Vista. And so, what we've done is, and we do this every year, in May, when we say, that's okay, everybody's had a chance, first intra-districts are due. So we know now where everybody wants to be, and we set classes, and that's where we look at staffing and whatnot, we set classes. And then we also decide, okay, if after this date, we get a kindergartner. Well, this is, Hope is closed, but VA has spots, so it doesn't matter where you land in the district, you're told, oh, your spot now after May 1st is at Vieja Valley. So it won't necessarily be, like for instance, second and third grade is closed at Monte Vista next year.
Okay,
If
so
you
is that
moved into
true?
this district,
Okay.
and you moved like right next door to Monte Vista and you had a second grader for next year, I forget where we overflowed second, but we overflow, and so those students get diverted.
Okay, so it will be closed.
Yeah, and it's important to note that when you're diverted based on enrollment, it's for that year, but then we reconsider everything again, so we let all diverted students know, oh, if you can stay at the school you were diverted to, because a lot of times parents go, wait, I actually love this community, I wanna stay here. So then we just have them fill out an intra-district transfer form and grant that intra-district. Or they could say, no, I want my spot at my neighborhood school, and then they're considered then when we do staffing and set classes.
Our next door neighbor right here had to go to a different school and we moved in.
Well,
Yeah.
and I know there are a lot of people who are in different districts who wanna be at Monte Vista.
Different campuses.
Or sorry, different,
Within the district.
different schools, yeah,
Yeah.
within,
We've granted, we've gone through that process, and I think we were able to grant almost everybody. Yeah, we denied some too, you know,
Yeah.
depends on class number.
So if Mr. Regan hadn't left or been leaving, would this be a conversation?
Yeah, I would be transferred a teacher, and we wouldn't have hired a teacher.
Okay, so it would just so happen that it landed on a
It has
year that
nothing to
It has
do-
nothing to
yeah.
do, and that's why Vieja is able to backfill their spot because they're,
They have 52 more students, yeah. And I'll be honest, is there was a time when we were in budget development, because we're unsettled in negotiations, that I wasn't gonna fill either of the two spots, but our caseload numbers became apparent. I'm like, okay, I have to hire a special education teacher. And then I was still considering a transfer somewhere to backfill Vieja, because we have an unknown, and that is that, you know, we haven't settled negotiations, and we're getting into a more precarious spot in budget. So I was wanting to wait till we got through, but then I looked at those numbers at Vieja, and I'm like, I can't make it work, and I can't constrict somewhere else right now. I'm still keeping my ratios around 20-1 district-wide, and that's, you know, if I can make that work, we're gonna make that work. So that's why I committed to filling those two spots.
By no means a budget expert on this. I've been lonely deep diving the last week, but having gone through everything, it does feel like that the budget was a little conservative on the conservative side. Just in general, my feeling. This is opinion based, especially with the reserve, the Fund 17 reserve, which rainy day money, that kind of thing, and then just looking at ratios of things like teachers, funding of teachers to the overall percentage, things like that. We're just slightly under. They were close, but not too, but just slightly under. But understanding the negotiations and having not publicized the impact of that, then that leaves the unknown. So I think for me, it was a question on when you make the decision,
Yeah.
like after negotiations, when you know what the numbers are.
Right.
And, you know, they're projecting property tax revenue increases of standard inflation of, I don't know, 3% per year, and so.
Just what we get from the tax assessors.
The reserves are gonna go up, or not the reserves, sorry, the overall revenues are gonna go up naturally because of that, but inflation and offsetting and all that, so. I think that's where, for me, it was like, when do you make the call? Like, and I realized you had to make it at some point, so.
Yeah.
But, you know, as soon as that, it'll be interesting to see when the negotiations are finalized, you can see the number impact.
Yep.
Whether, are we still overly conservative? And I recognize why we are considering, especially what happened 10 years ago or so, but, you know, or could we wiggle here and there?
So we're a member of what's called Schools for Sound Finance, which is it's an association that is solely for community funded districts. And I'm a board member on SF Squared. They're the ones who paid for us to do the test claim mandate. That wasn't district money that we used for that. Their targets say like 33%, and don't go too much lower, and if you can go higher, higher. Even the LAO for like our own state budget, they're talking about having a state budget reserve of 50%, and that, you know, school districts budgets are always funny. People go, well, you know, it's so different. Yeah, because budgets are a moving target. Every day my budget changes, every single day. We had an unfortunate incident in Mrs. Prince's class this weekend where I had a massive plumbing issue that started Friday night. And so I want you to imagine the costs that it just cost the district to have plumbers here on Friday night and again on Saturday. You know, that's nothing that, like, you know, I've said, oh, and I will have this amount of budget, you know, for having sewage problems, you know. Those are those economic uncertainties. I don't know how many of you are aware of the situation that Carpinteria and Montecito are in right now.
What is it?
So there was a law passed about 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact number because we're not having to deal with it, knock on some wood right now, where it lifted up the statute of limitations for victims of sexual abuse. So Montecito is in a situation where students from the 1970s have claimed that they were sexually abused. All the staff members that were around or that could possibly serve as witnesses are deceased. No current staff member was associated with the district in the 70s, and there's no backup for the claims, and liability insurance was not existent. You know, that company, if they had insurance, there's no history of that company of liability that cover liability. They probably didn't have liability for that back then in the 70s anyways. And so they're facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that will be settled out of general funds. And their board is deciding to go to jury because, I don't know if you know this, but California is #1 in what are called nuclear settlements, where juries award massive amounts of money, or to have a multi-million-dollar payout that comes straight out of their general fund. Carpinteria is in the same situation. And what this is causing, we don't have a case against us, thank goodness. This has been a massive nightmare for 2 of my colleagues. But can anyone guess what the impact of this is on us? Because it is having an impact. What do you think our liability insurance costs are happening? Our insurance costs are zooming up for our liability insurance. Yeah, so you know, just these kinds of things that you don't necessarily think about, that I have to think about at 3 a.m. You know, are just many of the multiple issues that you know, that impact how we can run as a school district. So.
On a positive side, the budget is in a good situation.
It is.
It is. Right now it is. I know there's, the backup is there's uncertain, like next year looks okay, I think, in general. And I'm summarizing what I heard last night.
Yeah.
Next year looks okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we're even going to be almost balanced. I think even the deficit's starting to eat down a little bit. It's a little bit of an operating deficit. It's the outer years that are looking a little precarious.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it'll be interesting to see the outcome of the negotiations to kind of get a real answer.
And the impact of local development too.
Yes.
Because as a community-funded district, sorry, we love your kids. We're happy they're here, but it's not like we're dying for increased enrollment. Increased enrollment is a negative impact for us. So hence also my calling out, hey, we've got to pay attention to this.
You just want everybody to move to bigger houses, right?
That would be
Reestablish
great. If
property
those
tax.
were single-family homes being sold,
Keep flipping and
I would
reestablishing
be like,
based on that.
woo, you know?
But
But there's not.
The city council meeting.
Yes,
by the way,
yeah, and
start
thank you for
going
coming to that
Yeah.
meeting, Jessica. By the way, speaking of impacts, I've already had a lawyer, you know, start a public records request about that meeting and upset developers are gonna come after us for wanting to have conversations about the impact to the district, so.
Do all those legal fees come out of your general fund?
Yeah,
too?
yeah.
No, okay.
I don't have a special.
Yeah, I know. There's the general fund. There's multiple funds.
I'm not
so I was
paying for
asking.
them.
Forgive me if it's already been answered or if I can find it anywhere else, but can you just explain how the combo class works, the structure works?
Sure.
You guys said it, someone said that, like, if you can find it elsewhere, but I'm still unaware
Sure.
of how exactly it's working.
Yeah, so there'll be some second grade students and some third grade students.
Yeah.
And
And that's one teacher?
and
Or
one
that- okay.
teacher and one instructional aide.
Yeah.
And they'll they'll have instruction the same way, and as Mrs. McNeese pointed out, as we do in this, especially in this school, a lot of small group instruction
Yeah.
will be happening. That's how a majority of classes actually, if you've been in classes, most of you have, we get a lot of small group instruction, which is, you know, especially more suited to second and third graders than, you know, a professor style instruction. So, and I don't know if you want to add more, you know, Becca.
Yeah, because you were talking about like when they break out into specialists, like then you come and help out, or was there?
So,
Yeah.
for instance, you might mix all the third graders. So one class that's straight third would have some third graders going, and the third graders from the combo class.
Okay.
So they
That's
would,
what I was
let's
confused
say,
about. All right.
be at music.
Yeah.
And then the second graders left from the combo class, so the 11 second graders would be getting social studies or science. So they're actually getting like a really small group experience.
Right.
And for
And
all the
combining with the
reading-
other, and then so there's it's shifting. Okay, that's all.
So we just,
yeah.
it's just a puzzle, but you end up with
Yeah.
these great teachable small groups. It's actually can be really great.
Will you combine like field trips, or I know like in second and third grade we have wax museum, and there's, you know, you have different things that every grade at Monte Vista does,
culture.
that, yeah, like how will that
That's
work?
when you work with the other
That's why
straight.
we're basically
Okay.
we'll be a team.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
And yes,
three,
the
the
answer
three
is
of you
yes, a
teachers
lot of
will be
those
like the
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of those things will continue,
Yeah.
and some things might get altered but those decisions, we haven't made any of those decisions yet.
And that happens
Every,
Right,
teacher
yeah,
turnover.
but like,
Yeah,
watching
so it's
those
almost-
third graders at the wax museum today, and
It's
Zoom
all-
night was
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, absolutely. We
Yeah.
wanna keep a lot of those traditions.
So like the third graders will be seeing a lot more of the other third grade teacher as, you know, as if it would have been just a regular school year, you know.
I mean, most of it would be, let's say you're teaching math and you would teach it in small groups anyway, at
Mhm.
least I
Okay.
would in a second grade classroom. You might have one small group that's second grade and then the third graders, if there's more of them, you might have two other small groups that are third grade.
Sure.
So they're still going through small groups, their instruction's just geared to their grade level. So
Gotcha.
you're
Okay.
getting third grade math if you're a third grader, second grade if you're in second grade.
Yep.
Or and it's also room for differentiation, right? So if there's a second grader who needs some extensions, they can work, you know, in a different group, so there's flexibility in that as well.
Okay.
That's a really important piece, what she just said to me. Yeah, so if you have a second grader who's like ready for two-digit multiplication, right?
Right. Move up a little bit. Yeah.
Right, so there's that opportunity. The other thing that Monte Vista has that, in Buellton, we always had one or two combos, but what Monte Vista has that Buellton didn't are the specialists,
Sure.
right? So you've got opportunity, you got the PE, you got the music, you got the art, and so what that creates is like opportunities for all three teachers to collaborate together.
Okay.
And also opportunities, as Mrs. McNeese said, when one group goes, then you can do like, you have 12 kids in that classroom doing science, like 12 third graders, and you got one teacher with 12 third graders doing science. So the specialists really kind of open things up in terms of the master's schedule for me.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on what you just said, Hans, I think that it also, what we've, in working on that puzzle, in the last few days, we want to create opportunities for all of the second graders to mix and all of the third graders to mix. So those kids that are in that 2-3 have tons of opportunities to be with their grade alike, as well as there's tons of positives of the situation, there really is.
In the past, when we did field trips, we would have, like, all the third graders would go together to a third grade field trip, and maybe the aide would go along with them. Or maybe the teacher would go and the aide would stay and help cover the class. So there's flexibility in that way too. So they don't really miss out on things. It's just moving parts.
Does that make sense?
Mentioned August 1st, is there a relative timeline? I know it's not perfect, even every summer, but like of announcements of events of. I know
Back to
we're-
school, meet your teacher,
Okay.
right before meet your teacher.
Just wondering if it was gonna change, given this is
No.
a little different. Okay, thank you.
Do we need more aid time? Because I know, like, or at least I've heard that, like, we've kind of run out of aid time.
I don't know
And
where
like,
you would have heard that. We've
less aid.
expanded aid time. That was another thing we did when
So-
we righted the budget.
So So aid time has been expanded because
No, not this current year, I'm saying when we righted the budget after our budget crisis, we used to only have aides 135 days of the year, and now we have them 170 days of the year, TK 180, because that's mandated. So we expanded, that was another thing we did, with COVID funds too. But we were able to, the parcel tax, thank you all for your $79 a year. Appreciate that. The parcel tax helps fund our general education aids and supported that expansion to 170 days.
And how many days?
There's 180 attendance days. And so generally during parent conference days, the 10 days of parent conferences, we don't have aids on those days, generally shortened days.
Okay. So am I mistaken that some classes
Yeah, I
haven't had?
So what
their
happened
aids?
is this
What
year,
happened?
they worked the parent conference days.
Okay.
And so because of that, now on the back end, they're having to like take days off,
Yeah,
so that's why you
because
see me
some
out doing
people ran
kindergarten
out, right?
recess every day
Okay.
now, cause I'm covering for Virginia, cause she worked during this conference, so we're gonna be more purposeful next year, where we say, okay, let's lock in as these days off. And that's also a conversation with the teachers, like, you know, when the teachers would be all right, you know, based on their schedule, not having an aid on a particular day.
Okay. That makes
So you weren't shorted, it was just structured differently if they covered.
It was poorly planned on my part.
If they covered
sense.
conference
It should
days.
only be 10 days throughout the year anyway.
Correct, yeah.
Except for, yeah, the TK.
TK, the state mandates a 10-to-1 ratio.
Do you know who the aide is gonna be, or aides?
I think you're fully hired for aides, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fully hired for aides. In terms of like who's going where.
Again, people can
Right.
quit over the summer.
Yeah, that's still TBD. That's still conversations that are happening. Like offer letters are still being signed because we had to hire additional aides, 2 more aides that we're bringing on.
But
to
you've
Monte Vista.
interviewed and-
We've interviewed, we've hired, we've made offers. I think the letters have been signed, and now it's like finding the right aides for the right spots. But I will publicly say, like, to me, Ms. Houlihan, as I said, is kind of like, I wouldn't move Ms. Houlihan out of 2nd grade or this situation, because she knows the curriculum so well. And there's been many times where Mrs. McNeese or Mrs. Prince has, you know, been absent for whatever reason, and Ms. Houlihan can just jump on, pick up the sub job, and teach the class. So that just gives me a level of confidence. Yeah.
Is there an open rec for the VA head, like that interesting position of?
It's been hired.
Is it, oh, great, okay.
So in terms of year after next, what needs to shift?
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, it honestly, it's not like we don't, I mean, this is why I've been, you know, yelling from the mountaintops about development stuff. I look out 5, 10, 15 years. Our budget looks out 3 years by requirement. But we are in a state of flux right now as a district. Those La Cumbre developments are not the only developments. Don't forget, you also have some houses straight across the street. How many are?
6.
6, yeah. I'm guessing there'll probably be families there. Like I said, we've got another building coming on, the family housing development. On the former rug store, that was bought by Housing Authority, and they've yet to be determined what type of housing. I keep saying senior housing, but that they're considering family housing. And I don't mean to be not welcoming, but as a community-funded district, and I really love small districts, that's why I'm here, and this is why we have I just had the amazing experience today of having exit interviews with the 6th graders here. I don't know how many of you have had 6th graders here, but the 6th grade teachers had the structure where different staff, like I think the staff were, I know Mrs. Everman did, Mrs. Print, I don't know who, but each staff gets together with a small group of 6th graders, and we interviewed them, exit interviews. And the group that I was with, I had a student that's been here since kindergarten, didn't have TK then, and I said, what kind of parting words do you have for me? And he turned to me, and by the way, he had dressed up for the interview. He turned to me and he said, thank you. You've provided such a great experience for me from kindergarten on. And they went through COVID and they told me all about missing rumpus in the rainforest. And they had a different structure for old school days or whatever. But he said, this really feels like a family, and I love the way Monte Vista feels like a family. And he said, I see Mrs. Siciliano out in the neighborhood, you know? I've made, you know, really close friends, and so the kids really love that structure of a small school. I love the structure of a small school. I'm panicked about the impact that we're seeing. Not that we can't survive it. It's just gonna. We've got some challenges in front of us, and I'm hoping I can do what's right to guide it the right way. But we've got some big challenges, and so as Jessica said, as things come up, you're not going to stop that development, but let's do it thoughtfully. And when we get the opportunity to get funding for TK, let's go after it. Let's do these things to help maintain this very special, unique place that we have. Yeah.
Is it possible that when all that development happens, that they'll restructure the district line, or
100%.
Is everyone else full? Like, I don't know what other districts they would go to. Are those
The secondary goes to Santa Barbara Unified, but 100%. The board is ready. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to the point where it's like we know exactly how many of each units. But as soon as that happens, the board has already assured me, we can speak to this. We will do a demographer study, and we are going to be looking at intra-district lines, but we have to be very purposeful of not disturbing. Like, I've got a neighborhood over, I call it the Groves, off of that frontage road by the feed store. Yeah, I call it the Groves. They have a ton of kids. They had some population explosion over there. They've got a ton of kids over there, and they go, to Vieja Valley mainly. But when I look at those lines, it doesn't make sense. It makes sense for them to come to Monte Vista.
It used to be.
And to restructure. And so I've already told those families, don't worry, you're grandfathered in. I'm not going to disturb your elementary experience, but we will be looking, because right now that whole complex of La Cumbre Mall is set to go to Vieja Valley, and Vieja Valley we cannot expand heartily there. There's a fault line that runs through that campus, and the Department of State Architecture, which oversees all school buildings, they've only allowed us a very small circle to build in, and we've got a four classroom structure coming that's starting this summer. But I'm also have to get rid of 2 aging portables, so it's only a net gain of 2 classrooms. So we will redraw those lines so it won't all feed into.
You don't have a timeline for this, I assume, or you think when you're saying something, you're thinking 2 years, 3 years?
Oh no, it's
1 year?
like 5 to 7 years
We'll be
out.
gone.
I mean, there's still.
I won't be gone. I haven't almost
never know.
there.
But it doesn't matter because it does impact this district
Yeah.
and your housing, your home values. So, you know, I try to tell people, even if your kids are going to leave, this is important to our district. So.
When is your next meeting about that, so we can all?
It's not. The district meeting in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come to that meeting. 'Cause
Yeah,
there's
I will
some-
advertise it, and don't
Read your
text me
parents'
about it
words.
because it will get pulled up for public records request. So just call me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I went to a wedding. We're gonna go work. We're gonna go back to work. But I went to a wedding in May, and it was a former Monte Vista student that was in my class in 2nd grade, and he's favorite. Am I being filmed?
Yeah, you know, you might want to ask permission. I'm fine being filmed, but I don't know how other people.
His favorite food was sushi. He had a really hard time saying it, and he married another Monte Vista student.
Oh.
And there were probably 4 or 5 Monte Vista kids in the wedding.
Oh.
And I had no idea when I went to this wedding. He happens to be my mom's godson. One of those kids struggled in math so much in 2nd grade. We just didn't know. It was so hard. And she is a physicist. She's 23 years old and she's a physicist. Your kids are going to be fine. I promise.
Well, I learned today at the Wax Museum that Albert Einstein struggled until 4th grade. So, I mean, didn't speak until he was 4. I learned that today at the Wax Museum. As always, if anybody doesn't have it, I'm happy to give out my cell phone, but again, call me, don't text me. It is subject to public records request. You're welcome to, to contact me. I do try to make myself accessible. That's one of the things about a small district. So, if you have any further questions, I'm more than happy if something pops up at your 3 a.m. Don't call me at 3 a.m. But, as always, I'm here to answer questions, so. Thank you. Thank you to the teachers.